Hi everybody, it's Matt Stevens here for another edition of the Skoda We Love Cycling podcast. On today's podcast, we're focusing on fandom at the Tour de France and the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. And my guest is none other than Jo Rowsel. She is a Eurosport commentator and she's a double Olympic gold medalist. Here's what she had to say about the fans at the Tour de France. Well, we are up and running. Jo Rowsel, Shand, thank you very much for joining me on the We Love Cycling podcast. Firstly, how are you?
I'm very good. I do have a little guest here, though. I've got an 11-week-old baby, so if we do have any sort of background noise, that might be him. He's currently very settled, so we'll see if he joins in and has his say on anything.
Well, I'd kind of like him to join in the conversation, really, but he is only very young. He's called Oliver, isn't he? So yes. Well, let's just see how he goes. Hopefully, he's pretty settled. But Jo, thanks for joining us. The theme of this Skoda We Love Cycling podcast is all about the importance of the fans at the Tour de France and, of course, at the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Without the fans, well, where would cycling be? But before we touch on that, can you just give us a brief introduction into how you first got into cycling, okay, little potted history, and also your first exposure, experience and awareness of the Tour itself?
Yep, so I went through a talent ID programme with British Cycling back in 2003, so early noughties. Very much a cycling test on the school playing field, and sort of got told I had potentially raw talent to be a future potential cyclist. And it was at a time when there was a big drive to get more women or more girls, more teenage girls into the sport of cycling. So that was my route into cycling. But yeah, that was the early noughties. So it was the Lance Armstrong era, but it was an era where the Tour de France was a very famous race. It was very sort of easy to sort of name a handful of riders that were there. And I've got very clear memories of that first year when I got introduced to cycling through the Talent ID programme. I didn't really know much about cycling, but I'd heard of the Tour de France, and I sort of, as my homework that summer, really religiously watched the Tour de France and really sort of got myself up to speed on the different classifications and the different types of riders, and thinking to myself, like, would I be a climber, would I be a sprinter, would I be over that King of the Mountains jersey, or, you know, not really knowing what sort of athlete I might be. As it turns out, not born to climb mountains, but sort of very clear memories of watching those sort of early noughties Tours de France. And also that was the Thomas Voeckler era as well.
It was, so yes.
Big sort of French moment there for him. He had a long stint in the yellow jersey, I think one of the first summers that I was watching the Tour de France. So I remember that very clearly, and sort of quite how big a news that was.
And what did you make? Obviously, you were learning about the racing itself, because you went on to be a very successful racer, primarily on the track, as we know. I'm going to drop in double Olympic gold medalist, just so everybody puts it in perspective. But what did you make of the Tour, aside from the racing itself? What did you make of the crowds? The Tommy Voeckler event. It's a good example of the way that France gathered around him. Obviously, he's got that style on a bike, and he kind of raised his level because of the reception he received from the crowd, didn't he? So what did you make of the madness, the beautiful madness that is the Tour de France fandom and the fans at the side of the road?
I think madness is the perfect word. I remember watching and seeing on a lot of the mountains, on the mountain stages, you know, thousands of fans all over the road, and they just sort of part ways as the riders come through, and that was completely alien to me. Before my memories of watching the Tour de France, I was familiar with cycling at the Olympics. I'd seen track racing, I'd seen even seen bits of like BMXing and stuff like that, but I, you know, very much cycling in a stadium and not out on the open road like that. So I was completely stunned at these thousands of people that were clearly having a very good time and would just part ways right at the last moment as these riders came through. And yeah, I think madness is, you know, spot on, the really sort of appropriate word, that you've got this sort of real sort of funfair atmosphere out on the road. They looked like everybody was very much enjoying it, but I was almost quite overwhelmed, having never really seen sport in that way. I'd watched a lot of Olympic sport growing up, Commonwealth Games, all those sort of things that you normally see on TV. Obviously, team sports, football, rugby, very much we're used to seeing, and all fans are nicely contained in their allocated seats in the venue. And suddenly you've got professional road cycling, complete madness out on the road, and people just about parting ways in time. Obviously, occasionally, people are getting their photos, people are getting their selfies nowadays. It's a little bit different now. But yeah, really enjoyed that sort of the wildness of being out on the road like that.
And you've, for the last few years, I remember doing, I think it was one of your first, maybe not the first, one of your first commentary gigs with me. And you've since evolved into a wonderful commentator, both lead and co-commentator. And I know you're doing
following your lead there, Matt.
Oh, that's very kind, very kind.
You managed to do everything very well.
But you clearly love the sport. You now commentate on both men's and the women's side of it. But for the first time, you're going to be commentating on the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift for Eurosport this summer, aren't you? But you've also been on the ground at La Course, which is the most prior iteration before the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Can you just give us a sense of what it's like being on the ground from your role and experiencing the crowds there? Because it is different being there than watching them on television, isn't it?
So my first ever commentary role as a co-commentator, I'd done a bit of punditry before, but first ever commentary role was at the 2017 La Course, alongside Rob Hatch, a colleague that of course you know well as well, and it was an alpine stage, so the women had just this sort of standalone race. There was also a slightly strange thing 2 days later, a time trial, I think it was down in Nice. But we had a mountain stage for the women, very short, only about 65 kilometres. But the nature of the route for the men's stage was really long, so they sort of took a shortcut. And I'd gone out the weekend before. I'd ridden the Étape on the same route, which was brutal, by the way. I'd retired after the 2016 Olympics and hadn't really trained for it, and sort of thought I'd have enough residual fitness to, do a casual 220 kilometres, as you do. Turns out not so much. So I rode that, so I had a real sort of idea of the roads, and there was a lot of people out and about during the Étape sort of cheering us on there. And then we were staying on a hotel about 50 metres from the finish line. It could not have been more perfect. And we had the women's La Course, and we had the men's Tour de France stage as well. So I joined Rob for some of the commentary of that. And again, just sort of blown away by the scale of the Tour de France. Obviously, having watched it so much on TV, but they've got the hospitality trucks, and there's so many people that are coming out there to watch it along at the side of the road, up the mountains. And that takes a lot of commitment, because you've got to get up early on your bike, go and ride up that mountain yourself, sort of park up for the day. Or obviously there's the camper vans as well. I was, having ridden the stage myself a couple of days before, I was overwhelmed at the commitment of some of the fans to be up on those mountains to cheer on those riders. And it was, of course, 2 for the price of 1 with the women's and the men's race. So it wasn't a bad day to be up the mountain cheering everybody on. But yeah, seriously impressed at the commitment of a lot of the fans out there. It's
amazing. I remember my first proper exposure to professional racing was the Tour de France way back in 1986 when Greg LeMond won, and I went camping with my dad in the Alps. We went up the Galibier, the Granon and Alpe d'Huez, and we camped there, and that inspired me to ultimately want to become a professional cyclist. I was only mucking around on a bike at that point, really. But could you just give us a bit of a sense on how important the fans are to the Tour and to bike racing in general? Because for me, and see what you think of this, there's a two-way, there's an inspiration in 2 ways. So you've got these professional athletes inspiring youngsters and anybody else to just maybe want to turn professional just to get fit, but also the crowd can inspire the athletes as well. It's a two-way process, isn't it? Just to give me your thoughts on that, and significant, the importance of the fans at the side of the road.
Incredibly important. I mean, I've ridden up plenty of mountains myself in training rides, and when you do ride a road race and you've got those fans at the side of the road, it just changes everything. You've got people cheering you on, you've got that number on your back, you know you're in a race, and it just gives you that extra percent. I don't want to quite put a number on that extra percentage that you may or may not get, because it's slightly different for everybody. But it does give you that boost that you can't replicate that in training. It only comes on race day. And it's something quite unique about road racing compared to other sports in that it's essentially free a lot of the time to go along to the roadside to cheer on those riders. Often you've got riders riding along roads that you yourself as a fan have trained on or ridden on. It's always been quite fascinating sort of following races where like, oh, I've ridden up that climb myself, and comparing sort of Strava segments and Queen of the Mountains and seeing how much they get smashed when the pros go up it. So it's quite unique in that you can really get up close and personal and really support the athletes. So as a fan, I think it's really unique compared to other sports, and quite how good an access you have to athletes at the start as well. Wandering around the team buses, again, that was something that sort of fascinated me when I had my first time out at the Tour, first time working there, and sort of wandering around all the media trucks and all the team buses and everything as well. It's fascinating. But then, as an athlete, when you've got those people cheering you on, it does give you that extra boost. And it's something, like I say, you can't replicate that in training. You can only get it from race day. And the bigger the race, the bigger the crowds, the more noise. And it does help that little bit. Cycling's a sport that it is painful. I guess that's one the word that we have to be honest with. Climbing a mountain isn't easy. Road racing is a tough sport. It's long days in the saddle. It's in the heat. It's brutal, and having people cheering you on really does make a difference.
And flip that round again now. In your role as a commentator, and you've commentated on a lot of races over the last few years. As I said, we've got the Tour Femme coming up. I'll be on the Tour and the Tour Femme, so our paths will definitely cross, or they'll be in slightly different places. But as a commentator, our role, I think it's fair to say, is to try and deconstruct the sport a little bit, explain it to people, give a narrative arc as well, try and tell the stories of all these individual riders, try and break down the tactics a little bit. Also give a sense of place, and we have a responsibility to talk about as much as we can the culture, the history, the geography, the cuisine of the places that the Tour passes through. But we also talk about the fans a lot, don't we? And I find myself quite often stressing that the fans help make the sport, because they do, and we have a role to recognise that as commentators, don't we?
Yeah, I think there's so many different layers to commentating on road racing, and part of the spectacle is having fans out at the side of the road, and part of that, as a commentator, like you say, it's one thing seeing who's first over the line, who's won the race, brilliant. It's another thing deconstructing team tactics, another thing talking about the areas that we're racing through, and it's another thing as well when you've got those crowds at the roadside, you've got those crowds literally parting ways as the riders go through, and just trying to convey that atmosphere to the people watching at home on the TV, and just trying to sort of say quite how special it is for the riders to be able to have that amount of crowd support, and try and bring that atmosphere into everybody's living rooms. I do feel it's quite a privilege as a commentator to be in that position where it's your voice on international TV, and it's you're in living rooms across the country, across the world perhaps, trying to convey that atmosphere to everybody. So it's a real privilege to do that, but also a lot of responsibility to be able to think, right, okay, I need to really get these people at home knowing quite how exciting this is, quite how much this means, and quite how much the fans are really making the difference here. And like you said earlier, it is a little bit madness at times, the Tour de France, but that's why we love it, and that's why it's so special. It's the biggest Grand Tour on the calendar, and the fact we've got a women's Tour de France now as well, Tour de France Femmes, avec, Zwift, has just boosted the women's side of the sport so much. It's probably one of the most common questions I had when I first got into cycling. People, I'd say to people, I'm, training to be a professional cyclist, and people would look a little bit confused. But then the question they would then ask is, oh, so you're going to do the Tour de France? It's that iconic race that people that perhaps, not even a particular cycling fan have heard of, people understand the significance of the yellow jersey. A lot of people understand the polka dot jersey as well. That seems to be quite a famous one, just sort of outside of the realms of cycling, but it really does go out to fans beyond the cycling world, and it's a privilege to be a commentator and try and sort of, access all those people that have got varying knowledge of the sport, varying knowledge of the different layers of interest, and the team tactics and the inter-team rivalries and all those things that we really enjoy unpicking. But ultimately, it's such a spectacle, and I love trying to convey that to the viewers at home.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't have put it better. I think what I try and do when I've done the tour commentary before, and also the Giro as well. I know that you're at home watching the Giro whilst looking after little Oliver. You're immersed in the Giro d'Italia,
so,
but so you were lucky,
day and night.
Day and night. But I feel you use the word responsibility. As commentators, we do have a responsibility to tell a story, but to recognise everybody involved, from the organisers to the riders, to the fans, to the places that it passes through, but acknowledging the amount of effort that some of these little towns, small villages put in to welcoming the Tour de France through as well. They'll have street parties that they'll make banners, they'll make these elaborate crop circles, they'll have people hanging from cranes. Without that, it'd be a strange show, wouldn't it? It's just when the racing dictates, I always do give a bit of a name check when I can, just thanking the people to put the effort in to support all of the Grand Tours, and obviously the Tour, as you say, is the biggest one. So I feel a responsibility to the people who take the time to sit outside, who basically organise the schools to come out and watch and wave the flags. All of that is part of the fabric of the Tour, isn't it? And it's recognising that I think is important.
Yeah, very much so. I'm always impressed by the level of effort that goes into locals. And like you say, it's the small villages as well. It's not just the big cities and the big towns. It's every little village that gets passed through. There'll be people coming out, and they've made that effort to whether it's create artwork or do something wacky on a field, and you get the lovely helicopter shots. I use the word wacky because there always is.
They are wacky.
There's a bit wild and wacky in the Tour de France. So it's always worth talking about, and I'm always impressed at the level of effort as well that people have gone to, and it does seem to be like the working day pauses. It can be a random sort of Tuesday at 1:00, but no one's at work at that point, and everyone is out on the roadside and making the most of the Tour passing through where they live.
Now, my final question is: you've been a professional cyclist. We both have. We've got this wonderful job where we can talk about the thing that we love. I consider myself a fan of the sport as well, because when I'm not watching cycling professionally and getting paid to talk about it, I'm watching professional cycling because I really like it. Obviously, it helps because we have to have that deep knowledge, but I genuinely love it. Are you the same? I put you on the spot here, but are you a fan? I guess you must be, Joe.
Very, very much so. I really feel like it's the best job in the world to work as a commentator. I don't even really see it as work because I get to talk about a sport that I love, and it happens to be going out on international TV. So that's the sort of, it's a bonus that it is work. But yeah, like you mentioned earlier, ever since little Oliver was born, it has been brilliant that we're now in stage race season. Plenty of cycling on TV. We were watching the Giro all day, every day throughout the month of May, and then listening to the various podcasts overnight when we were up for the night feeds. So it's I really enjoy following the sport. I really enjoy that we've got so many more women's races now on the calendar that are getting the attention they deserve. And I do think there's a lot of women's races that have been around for years, and there's organisers that have worked so hard, but a brand like the Tour de France just elevates the women's sport so much to have a women's version of that, and it just helps me explain it to people as well, which really helps when you've got a women's version. But yeah, very much a fan. Have been out roadside over the years at the Tour de France working on La Course. But yeah, based in the UK this summer, which very much helps with the little one. But yeah, I do very much count myself as a fan. So as a commentator or not, I will always be watching the cycling.
Bit of a prediction here. Will one day you take little Oliver to see the Tour and the Tour Femme, do you think?
Oh, I very much hope so, yes. I think he's perhaps slightly too young.
He's a little bit little at the moment, isn't he?
Neither of us are coping too well with the heat at the moment, and I don't think it'll be much better in July. But yeah, very much so. I think that's, like I say before, the accessibility of road cycling compared to other sports. You haven't got to commit to sitting in a certain seat in a ticketed venue. You can go along roadside, see the action, and go home and just enjoy the sport is essentially passing through the area for free. So I think that's very special about road racing and very unique compared to a lot of other sports. So I do look forward to introducing him to his first roadside event very soon, hopefully. Might not quite be the Tour de France this year, but we'll see what we can get to this summer and maybe another year out in France.
Well, Joe, thanks very much for talking to us. I think you've summed things up beautifully. The fans are such an important aspect of our sport, specifically, of course, the Tour and the Tour de France Femmes, avec Zwift. Give Oliver a little wave. He's been so well behaved. I can't believe we actually got through without him waking up. We had a bit of a preamble before our chat, didn't we, to get him settled. But he has been an absolute dream. So give him a little hug from me. Yeah. And our paths will be crossing at the Tour de France Femmes in the summer, won't they?
Yes, I look forward to your roadside reports.
Thanks very much.
Insight. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers, Joe.